Hi, I'm Porter Stansberry, and we are here at my wine cellar. It's built underneath my farmhouse. It's a 300 square foot temperature-controlled room with a cigar cabinet, sliding ladder system, and a tasting area. It's packed with rare vintages from Tuscany, Bordeaux, and Napa Valley. But we're not here to talk about wine, because while I have spent millions of dollars on wine, it's not the most valuable item in my cellar. There is something of far greater value down here. It's a 150-year-old tool that, as strange as it may sound, embodies a new pathway to wealth for you and millions of other Americans. For years, this pathway has been kept from you. It's always been the reserve of a small group who've quietly used it to amass untold sums of money. One man, an orthopedic doctor from Philadelphia, used it to become a billionaire in his 50s. Another man, a 26-year-old German vintner and brewer, used it to build a $2 billion fortune from scratch. Or, my personal favorite, a second-generation immigrant whose family moved to Ohio from one of the poorest countries in the world and used this pathway to generate hundreds of millions of dollars while still in his early 30s. These are exceptional stories. They represent the very best of what this wealth-building strategy has to offer. Not everyone ends up this wealthy, but that goes for any financial endeavor. You are always going to have those who prosper and those who don't. What's important for you to understand at this moment is that while this new pathway to wealth has always been off limits to all but a select few Americans, that is finally changing. Thanks to a new development in the financial markets, this remarkable wealth-building vehicle is now open to all Americans. And this 150-year-old wine key was the proverbial stroke of lightning that sparked it all. But fair warning, this will fly in the face of everything you've heard from the mainstream media about making money today in America. Turn on the TV and you'll hear about how the American dream is dead, how the poor are trapped, how wealth mobility has been extinguished. You'll hear that we are a declining superpower, a dying empire, a country on the brink of another civil war. And I'm not denying the problems that we do face. I've spent plenty of time detailing them myself. But the truth is, despite our challenges, I remain very bullish on America over the long run because of one simple fact. We are the only country in human history that was founded on the idea that wealth is something that can be created. Our forefathers were the first to realize prosperity was not the sole province of kings, queens, and aristocrats, but it is the right of every man, woman, and child. It was this belief in man's right to wealth that transformed America from a backwater of the British Empire into the wealthiest and most powerful nation of all time. There's a disconnect, though. Despite the technological advancements we continue to make as a country, I'm willing to bet that you personally don't feel much richer. You may even feel worse off than you were 10 years ago. That's because the real wealth that's being created has only gone to a very small group of people. But that is finally changing, and that's why we're here in my wine cellar. You see, I've spent millions of dollars on wine over the years, but the most valuable item in my cellar isn't any bottle of wine. It's this wine key. And although it's not worth anything on its own, the story and the idea behind this wine key is priceless because it has opened the door to an entirely new pathway to building wealth. And I'll be candid with you. I've been a financial analyst for almost 3 decades, but I have never seen anything quite like this before. It's a new development in the financial markets that allows you to profit from a selection of America's most exciting and potentially lucrative innovations. In particular, there are 11 breakthroughs that are going to generate billions of dollars over the next 2 to 4 years. And again, this new pathway to wealth is rooted in this 150-year-old wine key. Yet almost nobody knows it exists. And that's why I'm here today. My mission is to shine a light on what I believe may be the apex of financial innovation and to show you exactly how to take advantage of it as part of my mission to help you achieve your God-given right to wealth. All the details will be revealed to you for free in this video because let's face it, our country is hurting. Forces like inflation, stagnant wages, and offshoring have played a large role in our economic hardship. but something much bigger is brewing right beneath the surface. My name is Porter Stansberry. For my entire adult life, not a single day has gone by that I haven't pursued my right to wealth. I make no apologies for that. From starting my own asset management firm to investing in apartment buildings, I even built my own razor company. I've never paused in my pursuit of wealth. And why should I? It's my right as an American, just as much as it is yours. But sadly, that way of thinking that wealth is noble and that wealth is your right is dying. These days, the right to receive a welfare check enjoys greater popularity and respect than the right to make an honest living. The principles that built our country have been cast aside, and we are now living in a weird, inverted world where success is vilified and being rich makes you an oppressor. Our once great institutions do nothing but spew Marxist nonsense and grievance politics. Politicians, professors, celebrities, and coddled college students, all of whom, by the way, are rich themselves, rant and rave about the evils of capitalism. I don't know about you, but I grew up believing that wealth was created through hard work and perseverance. I know that wealth is not a finite resource. It's not a trophy that only some of us can have and others are denied. And wealth is certainly not evil. While saying that today will cause you to be tarred and feathered, the fact is our country, the greatest in all of human history, was founded on this principle that you have the right to wealth. The concept of man's personal wealth and freedom is the most important idea in all of Western civilization. It's the foundation of our liberty. Sadly, though, this belief in the right to wealth has been abandoned in our modern world of identity politics, government graft, and the toxic rise of socialism in America. No matter what the agenda of the establishment attempts to force on America, never forget, you personally have a God-given right to pursue wealth. And I want to help you achieve it. That's not empty talk. It's been my life's work. Over the last 25 years, my partners and I have built one of the largest financial research firms in the entire world. Our work is read by more than 16 million people from all walks of life, and we've predicted just about every major market event in both directions for nearly 30 years. In 1999, I told investors to sell Wall Street favorites like AT&T, Kodak, and AOL months before they all crashed and burned. In 2008, I accurately predicted the world's largest mortgage bankers, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, would go bankrupt just days before they did. In early 2020, during the height of the COVID madness when stocks were being crushed and investors were running from the market, I released a video saying it was one of the greatest times ever to buy certain companies. I also predicted the market would bottom within 10 days and go on to hit all-time highs by the end of the year. And both of those predictions are right on the money. And the stocks my firm and I have recommended over many years, like Google, NVR, Microsoft, and Novo Nordisk, they've been some of the best performers on the market. In November of 2022, I warned investors that America's corporate debt bubble was about to burst. I told my readers to stay away from companies that could be pushed over the edge, like Bed Bath & Beyond and WeWork, both of which soon filed for bankruptcy. I've also predicted the rise and fall of specific stocks like RLI, a small property and casualty insurance company that I've been writing about for over a decade. I could go on with 100 other examples of investments that my firm and I have recommended successfully. Now, of course, these are some of our biggest winners, and we don't always get it right. Nobody does. But our track record is exactly why our research is followed by so many people around the world, from Swiss money managers and venture capitalists to best-selling authors and NASA scientists. And what I want to share with you today is one of the most exciting stories we've ever come across. And if you truly grasp its importance, I believe it could have a transformational impact on your financial future. And again, it all has something to do with this 150-year-old wine key. Look closely at it. There's an inscription on the handle. Do you see it? It's the Anheuser-Busch insignia. Ironically, this wine key was made long before Anheuser-Busch became a household name. In fact, when this wine key was released, Adolphus Busch hated the beer his company was brewing, and he refused to even drink it. He called it Deutschlop, and he preferred to drink wine instead. Busch also faced an uphill battle against Frederick Pabst and Joseph Schlitz, who were the two largest beer producers in the country, but he refused to be intimidated. So to spread awareness of his brand, Adolphus Busch embarked on one of the most aggressive marketing campaigns in history. He ran ads in countless magazines and newspapers. He plastered Budweiser signs on wagons and rail cars. He advertised on billboards and distributed over 1 million Budweiser posters to bars and restaurants. He sponsored sporting events and branded stadiums. He even bought alcohol licenses and paid the rent for bar owners who agreed to serve Anheuser brews as opposed to the other brews. Back then, this kind of aggressive campaigning was revolutionary and paved the way for Budweiser's ascension to becoming the king of beers. But there was one particular strategy Adolphus Busch employed that has had more impact than anything else. He had the unique idea to license his company's name to manufacturers who made products associated with drinking. Things like playing cards, bottle openers, matchboxes, pocket knives, and wine keys, just like this one that I'm holding up now. Adolphus Busch knew that if he could get his company's name onto common household items, he could embed Budweiser into the public's collective psyche. You see, it wasn't beer that made Anheuser-Busch a household name. It was giving other companies the right to use that name to sell their products. While most people know Adolphus Busch as one of the founders of America's largest beer brand, he was also the godfather of modern licensing, specifically outbound licensing. That is the act of giving another company the right to sell your product, or in this case, using your name in exchange for an upfront payment and royalties on sales. This Anheuser-Busch wine key is one of the very first cases of modern licensing in American history. By giving manufacturers permission to use his company's brand on their products, Busch received a percentage of the sales of those products. This strategy not only contributed to higher revenues for the company, but it also cemented Anheuser-Busch as an iconic and instantly recognizable brand. By 1901, the company was producing over 1 million barrels per year and overtook Schlitz as the largest beer producer in the United States. And although Adolphus Busch may have been the first person to capitalize on the practice of outbound licensing in order to build his brand and generate massive wealth, he wasn't the last. Entrepreneurs around the country took notice, and the idea of building wealth around a specific product, process, or IP spread like wildfire. In 1903, Beatrix Potter created a character named Peter Rabbit, who then appeared in 23 books published by Frederick Warne and Company. Through this single character, Beatrix Potter made an estimated $10 million in royalties, and her books are still being sold all around the world today. Then there's Dr. Gary Mickelson, who became a billionaire by licensing his surgical instruments to some of the largest medical companies in the world. However, one man has taken the practice of licensing, the idea first pioneered by Adolphus Busch, and morphed it into an entirely new business model. It's a business model that doesn't just enrich the owner, but also that you can benefit from too. And I'm going to give you the name of this business for free, so you can take advantage of one of the greatest wealth-building secrets in America. Because while I'm sure you've heard of licensing and franchising before, you've likely never been able to capitalize on it personally. And that's why I'm eager to share this idea with you. It is a little-known fact that businesses who monetize intellectual property are the most capital-efficient enterprises on the market. They require very little cash to operate and grow, and therefore they produce excess cash that they can return to shareholders. As an investor, the whole trick lies in understanding which companies are capital efficient and have great long-term prospects. Once you know those two things, all you have to do is wait until those companies' shares become cheap enough so that they will carry very little risk. This is the heart and soul of my investing strategy, and it's also my greatest and most valuable secret. Back in February of 2006, I told my readers to go all in on Anheuser-Busch. Here are my exact words, quote, "If you buy Bud today, it could easily be the best and safest investment you ever make in your entire life. It's the kind of stock you should never sell." I said this because I knew that Anheuser-Busch would be one of the safest and best investments I would ever recommend to my readers. Not just because Anheuser-Busch is very capital efficient, but because they understand the power of licensing and branding. Today, the company has over 700 registered trademarks. That's not by accident. And again, it all began in the 1870s when Adolphus Busch started licensing his company's name to other companies. This is his actual legacy. It doesn't have anything to do with beer. And like any legacy, it didn't die with him. The practice of licensing and franchising has spread to every industry, from sports and entertainment to fashion and publishing. But like I said before, one man has taken the practice of licensing to an entirely new level, one which I believe could make you a lot of money in the years and years ahead. This man has innovated a new way to apply licensing, in this case, inbound licensing, to the $600 billion pharmaceutical industry. And how it works is simple. First, he uses an AI database to analyze the thousands of drugs that major pharmaceutical companies cannot afford to put through clinical trials. Then, he acquires specific drugs from those companies for a tiny fraction of what they might be worth. Lastly, he utilizes his resources to get those drugs through clinical trials and ultimately approved by the FDA. By developing this new model, he has transformed the extremely capital-intensive pharmaceutical business into a very lean, capital-efficient machine. See, a new drug on average costs around $2 billion to make and takes roughly a decade to develop. It also requires a team of scientists and biologists all working around the clock to solve some of the toughest challenges in the world. And even though drug companies develop thousands of new treatments, they have to carefully pick and choose which candidates to try and bring to the market. Not even the biggest biotech companies can afford to develop more than a few drugs at a time. And that leaves thousands of potentially life-saving treatments sitting on the shelf, sometimes for months or even years. What most people don't realize is that these discarded drugs are for sale. They can be licensed and sold to other companies. It's really no different than how Adolphus Busch licensed his company's name to Williamson Company, who made wine keys, like the one I've talked about. The difference is, unlike a wine key, a drug, especially a blockbuster drug, has the potential to generate billions of dollars in sales. And what this young second-generation immigrant has done has created an entirely new licensing model for the entire pharmaceutical industry. In short, he's built the world's most robust and potentially its most valuable biotech incubator, an institution that licenses drugs that have been cast aside, then pushes those drugs through clinical trials and collects the bulk of the revenues. It's one of the most inventive, capital-efficient business models I've ever seen. In fact, the last time I identified a business model this good, it was 2018, and the company was American Express. Sure, I know everyone's familiar with the brand and the card, but after spending months analyzing the business, I came to the conclusion that American Express is one of the most capital-efficient compounding machines that has ever existed. Its shares are now up close to 250% since I recommended them. What makes this biotech incubator so special, however, is that whenever it acquires or licenses a new drug, it launches a subsidiary business dedicated solely to getting that individual drug approved by the FDA. Each new business functions as its own entity with its own management team, and those teams are incentivized to get that drug approved as soon as possible. This is a very unique model. This biotech incubator has had 10 consecutive phase 3 clinical trials for the drugs it has licensed or purchased outright from biotech companies. They've also put 40 drugs into development, 6 of which have already been approved by the FDA, and there are more coming down the pike. In 2021, for example, this biotech incubator identified a Pfizer drug for treating ulcerative colitis. They bought it from Pfizer for $45 million, and following their new business model, they created an entirely new subsidiary business dedicated solely to bringing that particular drug to market. 11 months later, after the drug finished a highly successful clinical trial, Roche Pharmaceuticals came along and purchased this subsidiary business. Under the terms of the deal, our biotech incubator received a $5.3 billion payout. That's $5.3 billion for a drug that was purchased from Pfizer for only $45 million a year before. That is what makes this business model one of the most exciting I have seen in a very long time. Instead of engineering things at the extraordinarily capital-intensive level of biology, this company is engineering financial operations to make drug development vastly more capital efficient. Unlike biotech firms, which typically have to borrow huge sums of money in order to keep operating, this biotech incubator is one of the most cash-rich enterprises on the market. The reason being, they have majority ownership in every subsidiary business they launch. But because so few people understand the company's unique business model, it's really innovative, or how much money they've been quietly accumulating over the years, this stock has flown almost completely under the radar. In fact, I'm sure you've never heard of this business. But listen to this. This company is sitting on $7 billion in cash. Plus, it has another $2 billion stake in a publicly traded company of which it is the majority owner. Together, that gives them $9 billion in assets. And like I said before, one of their drugs is set to be approved by the FDA later this year. This drug has a total addressable market of 137 million people, and according to our research, could become a $1 billion to $5 billion annual treatment. And that's just one drug. The company is also working on 2 more treatments, both of which again have multi-billion-dollar potential. And with $9 billion in assets, you can bet they're actively hunting for new drugs they can acquire and bring to market. In fact, the CEO says the company has several licensing deals on the table right now, which could materialize later this year. But here's the most exciting part, and this is something that makes this situation far more valuable than anybody in the market today realizes. This company is in the process of suing 2 big pharma giants over patent infringement. And while it would take me an hour to lay out the details of this lawsuit, here's what you need to know. 2021 and in 2022, the Moderna and Pfizer COVID-19 vaccines generated over $110 billion in sales. However, these vaccines were also made using a patented technology that belongs to one of this biotech incubator's subsidiary businesses. My biotech analyst, Arez Kalir, who's one of the most accomplished and respected analysts in the world, took a deep dive into the situation. And based on what he's uncovered, the likely outcome of this patent lawsuit will be a 3% to 6% royalty on past sales. Depending on what the percentage is, we're looking at around a $2 billion payout from this lawsuit. That would give our biotech incubator not $9 billion in assets, but $11 billion. And with a current market cap of almost $9 billion, this would result in a negative enterprise value of around $2 billion. From what I've seen over the last few decades, a company's enterprise value is usually 20 to 200 times higher than its cash value. So the fact that this company could soon be trading for $2 billion below its market cap is not just rare, it's almost inconceivable. In fact, I've only seen this sort of rare situation a handful of times in my entire life. It happened once in February of 2009, when Tiffany's, one of the finest and best-known jewelers in the world, was trading for $25. Similar to our biotech incubator, the price of the company did not reflect the true value of it. It was based purely on broader economic fears. What most analysts overlooked is that Tiffany's held a vast inventory of gold and precious stones. And even after subtracting their debt, the liquidation value of all those assets was around $24 a share. In other words, you could have effectively bought one of the premier brands in the entire world for the value of its inventory alone. That meant you were getting all of Tiffany's real estate, you're getting the value of its brand, and all of its future profits for free. It was essentially a can't-lose proposition. That investment alone could have delivered returns of more than 400% with almost zero risk. Now, going back to the incubator and this lawsuit, there's obviously no guarantee that the company will win, but it does look promising. In April of this year, a district judge ruled against Moderna and a 37-page opinion. However, even if they don't win this lawsuit, the company still has $9 billion in assets. They still have multiple drugs in their portfolio with blockbuster potential, and they still have 10 subsidiary businesses working diligently to get their drugs to market. As I said before, this business model is really unique. Not only has it led to the creation of a hyper-capital efficient company and a traditionally slow and capital-intensive industry, but it was built upon a wealth secret that has been permeating throughout our economy for over a century, ever since the day this wine key was made. And I'm going to give you the name of it right now, because I believe this investment may be one of the greatest ways for you to reclaim your God-given right to wealth. The business is called Roivant Sciences. The ticker symbol is ROIV. This company has opened a new pathway to wealth, one that's been closed off to you for decades. What's perhaps most fascinating about Roivant, however, is that it was created by someone who represents the American dream more than about anybody else I've ever seen. He's a second-generation immigrant whose family came here in the 1980s without 2 pennies to rub together. But thanks to the idea that this wine key represents, he has elevated himself from the lowest rung of society to the absolute peak. Not only has he made himself a billionaire, he's opened the door for millions of other people to follow in his footsteps. Like Elon Musk, he is living proof that anyone, regardless of their background, can become highly successful if they are determined and inspired. His name? Vivek Ramaswamy. You may know him from the Republican presidential campaign, but despite his political platform, most people are unaware of the fact that he is also the founder and the CEO of Roivant Sciences, the company that turned the practice of inbound licensing into a scalable business model that anyone can invest in. Right now, Roivant is trading at around $11 a share. But given everything we know about the company, their $7 billion cash reserve, their $2 billion ownership stake in another publicly traded business, their patent lawsuit, which could add another $2 billion to its balance sheet, and the 11 drugs they have in their portfolio, one of which is expected to be approved later this year, I believe Roivant should be trading well above $11. And I'm not the only one saying that either. The investment bank, H.C. Wainwright, who has been the #1 ranked underwriter since 1998, says Roivant should be an $18 stock. Piper Sandler, who is one of the oldest and most respected investment banks in America, says Roivant should be $20 a share. Now, should you invest in Roivant? Well, that's entirely up to you. I wanted to bring this company to your attention because when it comes to fulfilling your right to pursue wealth, companies who understand the power of licensing are among the greatest compounders of capital in the world. Roivant has the potential to be one of those companies, but there are a few others, better established and superior companies that have also figured out how to capitalize on the 150-year-old wealth secret of licensing. Some of them license products from other businesses, others license their own products, and others buy rights to assets like mines and wells, and then collect royalties on those assets, which is a form of licensing. While these companies all operate in different sectors, what they all have in common is the ability to make money from the work other people do. By that I mean, instead of investing their own capital into developing a product, a process, or a project, they're able to compound their revenue with unrelenting efficiency from the capital expenditure that other companies make. That's why I call these companies intellectual compounders. And to me, they are among the market's most prized assets. Whenever I find an intellectual compounder like Roivant, I drop everything to study the business thoroughly because I know these companies have the potential to produce outstanding long-term financial returns. Take the story of William Fair and Earl Isaac, the two men who created the FICO score. Since its creation in 1956, the FICO score has become a fixture of consumer lending. Anytime a lender wants to determine how likely you are to repay a loan, it checks your FICO score and it pays FICO a fee. Those fees amount to around $2 billion a year. In other words, with very little change, FICO has been able to continually compound its sales based on a system it developed and licensed 80 years ago. Then there's Altius Minerals, a mining company that my team first found back in 2003. Unlike other miners, Altius doesn't get involved in the capital-intensive and high-risk business of actually mining copper, gold, or any other mineral. They simply buy the rights to existing mines and then collect a 1 to 3% royalty on all of the production of those mines. When my team and I first found this company, it was only making $76,000 a year, and the stock was trading for less than $2. But we knew, even at $2 a share, the company had an incredible business model. Like Rovent, they had developed a way to make money from investments that other companies were making. Last year, they collected around $70 million in royalties. Their stock now trades for over $20 a share. Then there's McDonald's. This is a company I've been recommending for decades. And it's not because I like the food. It's because McDonald's, like Altius and FICO, is actually a licensing firm. McDonald's licenses their products and their brand to franchise owners and then simply collects royalties on the franchisees' sales. McDonald's doesn't actually spend a single dime making hamburgers or French fries. That responsibility falls on the franchisee. And yet each franchise owner has to give McDonald's 5% of its sales as a monthly service fee, plus a $45,000 licensing fee, plus 10% of sales in rent. According to industry analysts, McDonald's ends up keeping about 80% of the profit that's generated by its franchises. It's incredibly lucrative and has yielded billions of dollars for investors over the decades. And then there's automatic data processing. This company licenses software to businesses for payroll processing. They charge a royalty on the movement of money from employers' pockets into employees' paychecks. It is one of the most financially sound business models of any kind. In addition to collecting fees for payroll processing, the company also makes money by holding your tax payments long enough to earn interest on them. The beauty of this business is that it directly benefits from economic growth. As more companies are created and the economy grows, their market expands, but their costs only go up slightly. That's why they have a nearly 50% operating margin and have doubled their earnings over the last decade and have more than doubled their client list from 490,000 businesses to over 1 million. Since we recommended the stock, it's gone from less than $50 to $250 a share. A year later, in March 2009, we identified another intellectual compounder called International Royalty. This is a company with royalty rights on 80 different mines. In 2005, this company only made $400,000, but by 2009, they were making $113 million. When the company was acquired by Royal Gold a year later, the stock rose more than 250%. That's the pattern I've seen throughout my career, over and over and over again. Once a company has figured out how to generate revenue from other companies' investments, it can grow without spending much of their own capital. That's why I believe your right to wealth can best be fulfilled through investing in intellectual compounders. It's also why my team and I have put together a new report that explores the very best of these companies. It's simply called Intellectual Compounders. Rovent is a company that's detailed inside. But there are 6 other companies in this compendium that every investor should know about and that I believe can produce even greater wealth than Rovent. One company operates in an industry that I hate, which is online gambling. Usually I'd prefer to ignore this industry due to its destructive impact on our society. But, my opinion aside, there is no denying the growth of online gambling. The global market for online gambling reached $65 billion in 2022, and industry experts project it will grow at an average compound rate of 12% a year for at least the next decade. That's about 4 times faster than the expected growth rate of the entire global economy. By 2032, online gambling is expected to be almost a $200 billion a year industry. I can't say I'm surprised by any of this, and let me explain again, it saddens me. Inflation and the cost of living has driven millions of Americans to the financial brink, They're unable to save or invest, so in desperation, they're turning to gambling in droves. Last year, a staggering 70% of the U.S. population participated in some form of online gambling. And while the majority of the companies in this space are low margin and highly capital intensive, they're also very volatile. There is one intellectual compounder that is emerging as not just a leader in online gambling, but as one of the very best companies in the entire world. This company doesn't operate casinos, it doesn't take bets, and it doesn't have to spend millions of dollars acquiring customers. And really, it doesn't even deal with the end user in any form. Instead, this company designs and creates online games and then licenses those software games to the casinos. In exchange, they collect an average of 10% on each game's profits, plus the licensing fees. Last year alone, the company released 110 new games and generated a record $2 billion in sales. They let all the other companies fight it out in the mud to acquire customers to process bets to operate casinos, while they simply created new games and licensed them out to over 700 gaming operators, taking a cut of every dollar gambled. This business model is highly scalable. Whether it's 10,000 or 10 million people playing these games, the marginal cost for each new player is almost zero. It's a phenomenally effective business. And since 2014, the company's profit margins have more than tripled from 18% to nearly 60%. Mind you, these profit margins exceed most of the world's most profitable tech giants like Google, Microsoft, Apple, and even NVIDIA. But more impressive than that, over the last 7 years, this company's earnings have surged 15-fold from $70 million a year to more than $1 billion. I can't remember the last time I saw growth of this caliber. Yet, with nearly $1 billion in cash and only $80 million worth of debt, the company is trading at its lowest valuation since its IPO in 2016. Why is the stock so cheap now? Like many sectors, online gambling experienced a boom in demand during the COVID-19 lockdowns. And since then, there's been a reversion to the mean. That's caused this company's annual revenue growth to slow from 90% in 2021 during COVID to a more sustainable 28% over the last 12 months. And as a result of the slowing growth, the stock has fallen by 50% since April of 21. For a company that's grown its revenues on average by 50% a year since going public, this is an incredibly low and, I believe, unjustified valuation. The company's management knows it too. That's why they just repurchased nearly $500 million worth of shares. The CEO bought 10 million shares himself, as the online gambling market is expected to grow by 12% a year, as I said, for like the next decade, coupled with the fact that this company has produced 44 of the top 50 most played games and has signed agreements with over 700 gaming operators. This company could not wish to be in a better place, both financially and creatively. Usually when I find an insanely profitable company trading at such a low valuation, there's a reason it's so cheap. But in this case, there is no reason, at least not a valid one. The stock has been cheapened because of the fact that growth in the online gambling industry is evening out. It's one of those rare situations where the market has made an egregious error. But this error will be corrected, as it always is. And when that happens, I think the stock is going to shoot up. All the details of this company are inside my new briefing, Intellectual Compounders. Inside, I'll tell you all about their business model. I'll tell you how they license games to hundreds of casinos. I'll tell you how they collect royalties from online gambling and how they've achieved unmatched profitability. I'll also give you an overview of the gambling industry and explain why Americans are increasingly turning to online gambling as a means to an end. This, however, is just one of 6 world-class companies you'll discover inside my new report, Intellectual Compounders. You'll also learn about a discount franchisor that licenses its brands and software to almost 3,000 businesses. The owners of those businesses take on all the costs associated with running them, advertising, inventory, upkeep, staff, everything. Meanwhile, this franchisor sits back and collects a 5% weekly royalty on their sales, plus additional fees. And because they get franchises to sign agreements that have a 10-year term, these royalties are always flowing. It's no different than how Anheuser-Busch was paid royalties on wine keys and matchboxes. It's no different than how Roivant makes money from drugs they don't initially develop. It's no different than how McDonald's gets paid from the sales of restaurants they don't own or operate. The major difference here is that we're dealing with discount brands, which is why these stores in particular can thrive in both good and bad times. Case in point, in 2008, this franchisor saw revenue growth of 14% as people started shopping for more affordable goods during the recession. This is what makes this company's business model so remarkable. They make money from 2,800 businesses that are owned and managed by other people. That's why they have a 64% operating margin. It's why they've posted revenue increases in 14 of the last 16 years. And it explains how their stock has produced an incredible average annual return of 16% over the past 19 years. That's incredible. They earn over $900,000 in profit per employee. By comparison, a typical retailer like Macy's only makes about $26,000 in profit per employee. Since I first alerted my readers to this superb business, it has already shown incredible strength, but I believe it's just a fraction of what's to come. As inflationary pressures persist, and as the cost of living weighs heavily on the consumer, more and more people are going to be downsizing their living standards and shopping for cheaper goods. In fact, one recent survey shows that due to inflation, over 90% of Americans are cutting back on spending. Sadly, these people don't have the kind of discretionary income they need to. So what are they going to do? They're shopping for discount brands, the exact kinds of brands this franchisor owns. Knowing this, I believe this company will continue producing market-beating returns as the cost of living continues to rise. All the details on this company are inside my new compendium, Intellectual Compounders. I'll tell you how this company's franchise revenues have almost doubled in the last 10 years. I'll tell you how they've earned nearly 16% returns for the last 2 decades running, and why their franchise model makes the business virtually inflation-proof. I'll also tell you how to get your copy of this briefing in just a moment. But first, let me tell you about one more company that is in this compendium. It's a unique type of business that has 0 employees and 0 capital expenditures. In fact, it's not really a company at all. It's an energy trust that owns mineral rights to almost 9,000 oil wells inside America's most prolific oil and gas deposit. And unlike an exploration firm, they do not have to spend a fortune to develop or maintain those wells. They simply collect a royalty on all the oil that those wells produce. It's another example of a business that benefits from the investments that other companies make. But like the others, it's also a business that can help you fulfill your God-given right to wealth. They get all the upside from higher energy prices with only a fraction of the downside. At this point, I can't see energy prices going anywhere but up. Woke policies continue to derail and sabotage energy production throughout America. Biden's new initiative, for example, forces coal plants to eliminate their greenhouse gas emissions by 2039. It's a ridiculous decision that will not only place these plants into early retirement, but also shut down the backbone of America's electrical grid. It will also make oil and gas more expensive than it already is, which means the mineral rights this company owns are only going to become more valuable. Also, unlike traditional energy companies whose sales plunge whenever there's a dip in energy prices, these guys are immune from that volatility. Since going public 10 years ago, they've seen their revenues grow by almost 1,000%. They also sailed through the 2020 energy price collapse with barely more than a blip on its cash flow. Consider this. My standard rule of thumb when seeking out capital-efficient companies is finding businesses that are capable of converting at least 10% of sales into free cash flow. Knowing this, I want to tell you that over the last 5 years, this company has averaged an incredible 77% free cash flow margin. Of all the companies I've told you about so far, none have a profit margin that is this impressive. Inside my new report, Intellectual Compounders, I'll give you all the details of this incredible company. Is this company going to make you rich overnight? No, of course not. If that's what you're looking for, then the 6 companies that are detailed inside my report are not for you. However, if you're a real investor, if you're looking for real undervalued opportunities that can grow your wealth year after year with relentless efficiency, then what you'll discover inside my report can fulfill your quest to earn wealth. Intellectual compounder number 1 is on course to make $2 billion this year by licensing games to online casinos while collecting 10% of the profits. Intellectual compounder number 2 gets paid 5% of sales from 2,800 stores that sell its brands. Intellectual compounder number 3 earns over $800 million a year from oil wells they don't own or operate. And these are just a few of the companies explored. Another company is a little-known legal firm that makes billions and billions of dollars funding lawsuits and then collects a portion of the proceeds from the cases they win. Since 2009, they've reviewed more than 13,000 cases and have won 92% of them. Mind you, the average law firm only wins about 26% of its cases, so this is an exceptional track record. In 2015, they spent $66 million on a lawsuit involving an oil company and the Argentinian government. In 2023, a U.S. judge awarded that oil company $16 billion in damages. This litigation firm expects to receive $2 to $3 billion in cash for its share of these damages. And this is just one of the winning tickets this litigation firm has in its portfolio of 1,000 cases. Since inception, they've earned profits on 84% of the total capital they have deployed. They have net profit margins over 60%, which is well over 700% higher than the average net margin in the United States. They've also tripled their sales, and in 2023, their earnings per share went up 19-fold. My report includes all the details on this incredible business and much more. It contains years, not months, but years worth of research that my team and I have been assembling. Each company in this briefing is a world-class, capital-efficient business that takes advantage of what I believe is the greatest wealth-building secret in America. That said, I believe these intellectual compounders should be a staple inside every investor's portfolio. And while I know most people want to chase the latest hot stock, the fact is, it's firms like these that will generate the greatest long-term returns. This is a way to build real wealth. Extremely capital efficient forever companies that don't get any media attention, but that will compound your money year after year relentlessly. Inside my new report, you'll get a full analysis of 6 of these different companies. 6 companies that have leveraged the power of licensing to create vast fortunes. Whether it's licensing products or brands, collecting royalties on mines or wells, or getting paid every time a software is downloaded. These businesses are the very best at what they do, and I want to get my report into your hands today because I believe that you have the right to wealth. You have a right to live comfortably and to feel secure. I produce this briefing as a guide for anyone who wants to participate and benefit from one of the best kept financial secrets in America. This is a wealth secret that started with this simple wine key. Inside, you'll get all the details on 6 intellectual compounders that use the power of licensing to maximize their profits and minimize their expenses. The opportunities detailed in this compendium span the entire spectrum of the stock market. But what these companies have in common is that they have figured out how to create multiple revenue streams that never stop flowing. They also tend to have very low debt, a very healthy earnings multiple, incredible sales growth, and are in the business of making money from investments that other companies have already made. That's what makes these companies essential to any portfolio. Their business model allows them to circumvent the volatility of the economy and to deliver market-beating returns year after year. But I'll tell you this, the only way to get access to my report, Intellectual Compounders, is through my private research firm, Porter & Company. I started this company in April of 2022, and we are the market's preeminent financial publishing company. My team and I carry out exhaustive analysis on every opportunity that we share with our readers. Outside of the research firms inside major Wall Street banks and funds, nobody is producing the same quality or depth of the work that we do at Porter & Company. Typically, membership to our flagship advisory, The Big Secret on Wall Street, costs $1,425 every year. While that may seem expensive on the surface, the value of membership dwarfs the cost, with our track record producing absolutely incredible results. Case in point, the majority of my recommended positions are up by double and triple digits. My average position is already up by 25% in as little as 2 years. As my reader, Mike Richards, tells us, your analysis is clear, thorough, and compelling. The composition is, as usual, just superb. It's clear, concise, and forces you to think and make decisions. Thanks again for doing what you do. You see, not only do we provide people like Mike with the most in-depth research in the financial world, we also provide our subscribers with better results. Again, our research isn't cheap, and it's probably not for everyone. I'm interested in helping people who want to build real wealth that they can depend on. Our research is for serious folks who have a legitimate interest in their right to wealth. And from a value standpoint, our work is worth infinitely more than what we charge. Now, let me be clear. No investment, no matter how capital efficient it may be, has no risk. And of course, past performance does not guarantee any future results. As a general rule of thumb, you should only invest what you can afford to potentially lose. However, I also know that for a lot of you watching, $1,400 is a big ask. And I don't want the price of our research to be a deterrent for you or anyone else. I want to be clear, I believe deeply in your right to wealth. You deserve access to this information, whether you have $5,000 or $5 million to invest. That's why I'm willing to give you a copy of our new report, Intellectual Compounders, without forcing you to subscribe to my flagship publication. As I've been saying all along, everyone has a right to wealth. You shouldn't have to speculate or take massive risk when it comes to your own personal well-being. It's not fair to you or your family. That's why I'm making this report accessible to everyone, not just those who can afford to subscribe. So here's what I'm offering. Instead of spending $1,425 for access to my publication, I'm willing to give you this report alone for just $199. That's a fraction of what you would normally be required to pay for this level of research. But if it means giving you the opportunity to learn about a new pathway to wealth that's been closed off to you for decades, then I'm willing to do it. No one, least of all me, should be standing in your way when it comes to your right to wealth. So it's settled. For $199, you can access my new report, Intellectual Compounders. You can download it, you can print it, and you can share it with as many people as you want. The content in this document is based on years of research that my team and I have been conducting. To me, it's worth 10 times more than getting an MBA from Wharton or a liberal arts degree from Columbia, the epicenter of stupidity and ignorance. And let me make one thing really clear. Although the companies that are detailed in my report have been thoroughly analyzed and vetted, these are not stock recommendations. I'm not telling you to go out and buy 500 shares in each of these companies tomorrow. My goal today was to shed light on the business model that they have. It's a business model that empowers you to capitalize on one of America's oldest wealth secrets, and that is, of course, the business of licensing and franchising. I believe these companies will continue to grow their earnings and sales because they make money from investments that other companies have made. So my report not only gives you a complete overview of this incredible and capital-efficient business model, it also educates you on the history of the modern applications of licensing and franchising. Let me be blunt. We invest millions of dollars per year in our research, and giving it away for so little is not how we typically operate. And that's why I suggest you take advantage of the special offer while it's still available. All you have to do is click on the button below. You'll be taken to a secure, encrypted webpage where you can review everything that's waiting for you and take advantage of the special offer. In addition to your special research reports, I'll also add you to the complimentary version of my financial newsletter, The Big Secret on Wall Street. As a complimentary reader, you'll receive a weekly email, just one, from my team with a redacted version of the original report. Each week, you'll get a briefing exploring the most important yet overlooked factors that are influencing the markets today. And I'll bet you that even our free research far exceeds the quality of anything else that you might be receiving, even if you pay for it. Of course, if you choose to upgrade to our paid membership, we'd love to have you, but it is not essential, and unlike other publishers, we will not bombard you with marketing. In fact, we rarely advertise at all. You see, we know the quality of our work is so good that when real investors see it, they tend to upgrade right away. And if not, no hard feelings. We'll still serve you the complimentary version of our newsletter every week for as long as you'd like. If you're ready, simply click the button below now to take advantage of the special offer. I'll see you inside. Thanks for joining me today.